It was raining again, the kind of cold, endless drizzle that made everything look gray and tired. The school courtyard was almost empty, puddles reflecting the flickering lights from old classrooms. Most teachers had already left for the day, rushing home to warmth and families. But Daniel Blake stayed behind, as always. He stood by the window of room 14, his hands deep in the pockets of his worn-out jacket, staring blankly at the rain. The echo of laughter from students who'd gone home hours ago still haunted the halls, a reminder of the life he once hoped he'd have, bright, full of joy, full of meaning. Daniel was 33, a literature teacher at Crestwood Elementary, known by most as the Quiet One. His salary barely covered his rent in the small apartment he shared with a leaky ceiling and dreams that had long since faded. He had once dreamed of being a novelist, a storyteller of hope and courage. But life had a way of humbling even the most passionate souls. Years of struggle, rejection, and heartbreak had left him hollow, living paycheck to paycheck, teaching kids who didn't listen, in a system that didn't care. That evening, he was about to leave when he heard it, the faint, muffled sound of someone crying. He froze. It wasn't the kind of soft sob that passed quickly, it was the deep, trembling kind that came from pain. Following the sound down the empty hallway, he found her, a little girl sitting alone near the lockers, her knees pulled up to her chest, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. If you believe that kindness and second chances can still change lives, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles. Your small act of support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world that compassion still matters. The girl looked no older than 8 or 9, wearing a pink raincoat too thin for the cold, her backpack open beside her, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Daniel knelt beside her gently, careful not to startle her. She tried to hide her face, embarrassed by her tears, but he saw the red around her eyes, the kind that only comes from long crying. She whispered something about her mother being gone, her father never home, and how she didn't want to go back to an empty house. Her words came out in pieces, small confessions between sobs. Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd seen kids cry before, but this felt different. It wasn't about a bad grade or a playground fight. This was loneliness, pure and heavy. The kind he knew too well. So he just sat beside her, quietly, until her sobs began to slow. He told her stories, gentle, hopeful ones, about stars that shine brightest after storms, about people who thought they were alone but found someone who cared. He didn't have money, or power, or much influence. But he had words, and he used them to build warmth around her fragile little heart. Her name was Emma. She was new in town. Her mother had passed away 6 months earlier from cancer, and her father, she said, was always working. Daniel noticed how she avoided eye contact when she spoke about him, as if afraid to say something wrong. He walked her home that night, holding her small umbrella over her head. The house was large, too large for such quietness. No one answered the door for several minutes until a man in a suit finally appeared, tired, distracted, holding his phone to his ear. The man looked surprised, almost irritated, to see them standing there. Daniel explained gently that Emma had stayed late and seemed upset. The man thanked him quickly, his tone polite but distant, like someone used to handling strangers efficiently. Daniel nodded, smiled faintly at Emma, and walked away into the rain, never imagining that moment would change both their lives. Over the next few weeks, Emma started waiting after class, not crying anymore, but sitting quietly as Daniel graded papers. Sometimes she helped erase the board, sometimes she just sat and read. It became their unspoken ritual. Daniel, who had spent years feeling invisible, began to feel something he hadn't in a long time: purpose. He started buying extra snacks for her, sometimes bringing an old storybook he thought she'd like. She began to smile again, shyly at first, then brighter each day. But what Daniel didn't know was that Emma's father, Michael Reynolds, had been watching. Michael was the CEO of a multinational corporation, a man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and fear in competitors. Yet none of that mattered when he came home to silence. After his wife, Laura, passed away, he buried himself in work, pretending success could fill the void her laughter once did. He couldn't bear to face his daughter's grief, because it mirrored his own. One afternoon, Michael arrived at school earlier than usual and saw Emma sitting under a tree with Daniel, laughing as they read together. It had been months since he'd seen her laugh like that. Something inside him broke, and healed at the same time. He didn't interrupt them. He just watched from his car, tears silently blurring his vision. That night, he looked up Daniel's profile in the school system. He learned about the man's low salary, his years of quiet dedication, the extra unpaid hours he spent helping struggling students. The next morning, Michael went to the principal's office, not as a CEO, but as a father. He asked about Daniel Blake. The principal praised his kindness but admitted he often went unnoticed, never asking for raises or recognition. A week later, Daniel received a letter from the Board of Education, informing him of a special scholarship program for teachers who showed exceptional compassion. It included funding for a writing retreat, something he had once dreamed of. Confused but grateful, he accepted. He never knew that Michael was behind it. Months passed. Emma grew more confident, her laughter filling the classroom again. Daniel attended the writing retreat, rediscovered his passion, and began writing a novel inspired by a little girl who taught him that kindness doesn't need recognition, it just needs courage. His manuscript, once finished, was quietly sent to a publisher through the scholarships network. A year later, Daniel was invited to a literary award ceremony. He thought it was for someone else's work. But when he arrived, surrounded by lights and cameras, he realized his story, After the Rain, had been published and nominated for an award. As he stepped on stage, overwhelmed, the host announced the sponsor of the program that made it possible, Mr. Michael Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Industries. Daniel froze. From the crowd, he saw Michael standing beside Emma, smiling through tears. It was then he understood. Everything, the scholarship, the retreat, the book, it all traced back to one moment of simple kindness in a quiet school hallway. After the ceremony, Michael approached him. He didn't say much, just thanked Daniel for giving him his daughter back. "You reminded her what hope looks like," he said softly. "And in doing so, you reminded me too." Daniel, overwhelmed, could only nod. In that moment, both men realized that sometimes, healing doesn't come from grand gestures, it comes from ordinary people choosing to care when no one else does. From then on, Daniel's life changed. His novel became a symbol of compassion and second chances. He used part of his earnings to create a small foundation supporting underpaid teachers and children dealing with grief. Emma would often visit his classroom, now full of light, carrying her favorite book, After the Rain. And every time it rained, Daniel would look out the window, smiling, remembering that one rainy afternoon when a poor teacher simply sat beside a crying girl, and unknowingly changed both their worlds forever. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles. Your engagement helps us spread stories that remind people that one act of compassion can ripple through countless lives. Sparkle special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness can change lives," if you believe that even the smallest act of love can heal someone's world.